to a special episode of the Eureka Conservative Podcast. Coming to you all the way from southeast Melbourne with my nutty dog here under my feet. He's as bad as a staunch ALP supporter. He's up and down. If you've been watching social media, it's glorious today how they're all losing the plot. But he's sitting at my feet tonight. That's unusual. So, thought I would come on board tonight, reflect on yesterday's great win for One Nation, but also reflect on some other things that for me are causing a little bit of concern. And for before all those come at me from the One Nation side, which has happened today, or the Conservative side, it's all right to express concerns. I want One Nation to win as many seats as possible, both upper house and lower house, in the upcoming Victorian election, which I think we'll struggle with, and certainly in the federal election, which based on yesterday's result, I think One Nation are a big chance of securing a number of seats. So it is all right to reflect after a big result like that. That doesn't mean I downplay, for example, the result from last night or people celebrating it or anything. So I just wanted to start on that point before we continue. So, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether it's One Nation, the Liberal Party, the National Party, whoever it is, that flag and this country takes precedence over all of it. And I'm not locked into any single party. And people might say, oh, well, you're One Nation. Well, no, I'm One Nation because I'm a conservative. I'm more conservative than One Nation candidates. I'm right now One Nation. And I say right now because I never lock myself in with any political party. But in Australia, the only conservative political party left is One Nation. So why wouldn't I be? And more importantly, they are now a shot, if not winning government, influencing government. So naturally, I'm on board with it. If there was a more conservative party, and I'll go through that later in the podcast, I would be definitely going for them. Before I keep going, I better just double check my sound and mics. If you ever watch me, the old technology IT behind this podcast can be, yeah, it's working. Is not the greatest, but it does the job. So unlike other influencers out there, I just come from my room upstairs, my little home office, no headphones, no mics, nothing, nice, just a budget price podcast. Okay, if you want to support that, you can. I'm not going to be selling you any merch or T-shirts or videos. I'm not going to tell you how to think. I'm just going to give you my opinion, and you can agree or disagree with it, which is what a democracy should all be about. Unlike what they say at the ABC, who thinks every person who dares consider voting for One Nation or vote for One Nation is a racist and a bigot. They've got to get some new lines. They're getting a bit boring, and they're obviously not working. So I'll just have a general discussion on last night. I think it means for us going forward as a nation, for what it means for us going forward if you're on the centre right of politics or like me, you're a conservative. Everything I say here is because I want One Nation to be successful. I want them to win seats, but just as importantly, you've got to see past them being successful at an election, because your true test of success isn't whether you win seats, it's how you govern. Now, if you can't see that far ahead, then you don't understand the political scheme of things very well. Because if One Nation do win, and I'll, for example, put the Gough Whitlam government in there, they got in government, everyone settled, everyone carried on, and then you had the most horrendous government for about 3 years, and they got turfed out in 2 overwhelming losses. So the last thing we want is whoever makes up our government that is non-ALP aligned, and let's hope that's One Nation, even, I'll get crap for this, even if it's the LNP or whatever, anything's better at this stage than the ALP. I want it to be a conservative government. I'd love to be a One Nation government, but there are issues that One Nation need to start addressing because they have an historical opportunity to become a government in this country. But to do that, they're going to have to tick an awful lot of boxes, and there's an awful lot of work to go on, and they have to be awfully smart on their strategy, who's their candidates, who's their supporters, who is around the One Nation bubble that don't reflect poorly on them so they can win seats, not just in regions, but in the cities. Okay? So wonderful effort by Pauline, wonderful effort by a crew. Sensational win and something that gives us all hope. And they partied long and hard, and good on them for partying long and hard. They thoroughly deserved it, okay? I'm in Melbourne, though. Okay, I'm not up in Farah. I had work on all day yesterday. I've just worked 2 12-hour shifts through my business the last 2 days. So I was pretty busy. By the time I got home from work, the by-election was already over. They're already making their acceptance and concession speeches, and I missed the acceptance speech for One Nation. I'll go through a little bit of my concerns. All right. Number one, David Farley, who won, don't know enough about him. Okay. He said a couple of things in regards to immigration, which concerned me. In regards, we basically need them for the fruit pickers and all this sort of thing. I think that's a nonsense argument, but it's an argument, so fair enough. He does have, and I haven't seen this refuted yet, accusations that he applied to be a Labor Party member, and he also supported the independent candidate there. So that gives me a little pause for concern. He's 78. At 78, you don't, trust me, as an older person, at 78, your worldview doesn't change much. So I hope he's not a careerist. If he's a careerist and things don't start going his way, he'll start worrying about his seat and how he can lock in that seat of Farah and potentially become an independent himself. Now, everyone's going to come at me for saying that, but that's just a fact. It's happened before. It happened in Clive Palmer's party. It has happened with One Nation before. I hope they've done their due diligence on this guy, and I hope he's all in with One Nation. I think it's a part of our system, and I'm sure Pauline Hanson and I'm sure Malcolm Roberts would agree with me on this, that if you do have people that leave a party, so David Farley got elected based on One Nation votes and on their platform, if he decides to leave their ranks, and this should be across the board, if you stand for a political party and you stand for election on that party and then you split from them, there should be a by-election and there should be another election held. You shouldn't be allowed to continue to sit in the parliament as another independent because you didn't stand as an independent, or you shouldn't be allowed to jump party. So, for example, unpopular, I don't think Barnaby Joyce should have just been allowed to jump party into One Nation. I think once you decide that you are not representing your electorate on the basis that you stood for, there's got to be a by-election. The people of that electorate have got to get a say. Well, listen, we in the case of Barnaby, they should have been able to go to a by-election and say, yeah, listen, we support Barnaby jumping to One Nation. Bada boom, bada bing. He's with One Nation. But if they didn't want him, they wanted a National Party candidate, they should have also had the opportunity to have a by-election and vote for the person they wanted. That's representative democracy. So same thing with Fatima Payman. She shouldn't have been able to stand for the ALP and then go off on her own. Same thing with Jackie Lambie, who stood for Clive Palmer. This, to me, this is all bullshit. You either stand as an ALP candidate, a Liberal candidate, a One Nation candidate, a Greens candidate, an independent candidate, and if you're going to change tack halfway through an election, you should have to stand in front of your electorate and say, give me approval to switch. I don't know on that one. I don't know what's an argument. So we'll see what David Farley does. If we had that in place, David Farley wouldn't jump shit. That's why I raised that up. So if you got to be honest with all these things. I want One Nation to win. Like I said, I want it to be successful, but I'm not tied at the hip. I like having my independence. No one's going to come and buy my opinion. So if you're listening to me, I'll just tell you what I think. And it does bother me a little bit with those things remaining unrefuted. I mean, the one thing that could derail One Nation between now and the next 2 years is someone like a David Farley does jump ship. Because then all the finger pointers will come out and start pointing at Pauline and One Nation and all them again, and she'll cop it for that. So, most politicians across the board, doesn't matter who they are selfish individuals, especially once they make politics, because you get put on the gravy train. And once you're on that gravy train, it's a pretty good train to be on. You get, a lot of these people who would never be earning the money they're earning in a private sector are all of a sudden earning nearly $300,000 a year, getting all their expenses paid, getting an office paid, getting everything paid, their trips, all that sort of shit. So, I get it. But will they keep with their values, or will they sacrifice those values to try and retain their position on that gravy train? Probably 80 to 90% of them will sacrifice their values. So, that's just Sorry, that's just politics. So you've got to be a little careful. And there's also people around political parties that you've got to be careful of. And here I am about to put myself out there again. And I don't have to get out there. I don't have a huge following, but this is just my opinion. And it'll be interesting because I'll invite them all once more, done it several times, onto my podcast. Grifters. I'm very concerned about grifters now jumping on the One Nation coattails. All of a sudden they're going out for dinner. They're getting these interviews. They're jumping into their election parties. They're forming fake, ridiculous parties to direct preferences and blasting it all over the internet, which is kind of stupid strategy because when you blast it all over the internet, you're telling everyone what you're doing. So it's kind of silly. And they hope for some reason in Victoria that the group voting ticket, they're going to get rid of it before November. The ALP aren't that stupid. The ALP is one of the most ruthless and, I hate to say it, smartest political machines in Australia. I hate them to death, but they are smart, they are ruthless. In sports, you've got to understand your opponents. Same thing in politics. If you underestimate the ALP, they'll wipe you out. The Liberals have underestimated them. They wanted to go Labor light. And the Liberal, you nearly got the tombstone with rest in peace. I don't see how they come back from yesterday, the Liberals. They are in a world of hurt. It would take a very special leader to do some very special things. And they better hope Tony Abbott becomes president of the Liberal Party and he purges every single bloody moderate. That would be one of the first steps to coming back over the next 3 to 4 election cycles, because they're not going to come back by the next election cycle. No way. They are not winning government they're probably not winning government, and I doubt they're certainly not winning government by themselves. So we go across to One Nation, and now you got what I call the grifters. And I'll name them, and any of them are welcome on my podcast to push back. Monica Schmidt, Topher Field, Avi Yemeni. All of a sudden, Topher's at the after match. He's interviewing Pauline Hanson. He's meeting her at the plane. She didn't look like that she knew who he was. And I don't think they probably would know these guys in their background. But all of a sudden, Topher's hanging around him and he's pushing him. And this guy's supposedly died in the wood libertarian. Only just last week, talking to Rukshan, he was all for immigration. Everyone who didn't everyone who was against mass immigration is basically in his book naive fools, because he pushed the line that David Farrar pushed in David Farley pushed in Farrar, that if we don't have mass immigration, no one picks the food. No one picks the crops. We won't have food. We won't have all sorts of other things. We need them to do the hard work because Aussies won't do that work. It's just a stupid, naive argument. Aussies have been doing that work for 120 years. You got to give them the chance. And most of those workers are backpackers anyway, so they're not your typical mass immigrant there. And Topher's, I have family that live in the country, all right? And in the regions are totally different. The mass immigration impacts haven't hit them yet. So they sort of live in this bubble in the country where everything's fine. If you're living in a metropolitan Melbourne, where I am, you see the impacts everywhere. Topher doesn't live there. He lives up in the seat of Farrar. And all of a sudden, he's in the after-match party and he's asking questions of Pauline and he's asking questions of Barnaby, but he's opposed to one of their key core policies, which is against mass immigration. But he's jumped on because what? It lifts his profile. More clicks, more followers, more chance to sell merchandise. And he'll stay on that coattails. And I hope he does not get in the ear. This is the same guy that pushed the marble videos and put the majors last, and I think played a pretty important role in Albo winning 2 elections in a row, because everyone was put the majors last. Well, no one on the left is ever going to put the ALP or Greens last, and all the idiots that put the majors last in the last election, the only ones who got hurt by that was the Liberals and Nationals, and now they're gone. The reality is One Nation, you've got to win 76 seats to win government. One Nation now has 2. They've got 74 more seats to win. That is a massive, if not impossible, task. And if we don't get rid of the ALP by 2028 and they get another term, my fear is it could be then too late. with the rate of mass immigration coming into this country and the vast bulk of them voting left and winning and consolidating inner city electorates, there might be no coming back for the centre right. Forget Liberals. We can win all the regional seats we want. To win government, you've got to win metropolitan seats. It's a non-negotiable. There's not enough seats in the regions to win government. So the other one they've got, Monica Schmidt. Monica Schmidt, less than 12 months ago, I'd say about 6 months ago, she ran a campaign to get everybody to go join a major party. She gave up all the One Nation. She gave up on the Libertarian. She gave up on all those. She has a brain fart every second day. So, now she's jumping on One Nation with a brain fart. Oh, we're going to form all these little different parties to take advantage of the group voting ticket. So she's got on board with Harvey. So now they've got all these and they're pronouncing it to everybody. This is not the idea has some merit. But the one thing you shouldn't be doing is broadcasting it. And the only thing I think so it's not really an initiative to get preferences flowing to One Nation, because once you broadcast it, the left will just educate all their people not to vote for these parties. So you're not going to get leftist preferences coming to One Nation in a flow of preferences to get them above the board. What they're hoping is that the ALP government here will get rid of the group voting ticket. Well, if the ALP get rid of the group voting ticket in Victoria, then I take it back. They're not the smartest political machine in Australia. You wouldn't get rid of it. It serves you too well. This is why they put the major parts bloody policy was so stupid. People don't seem to understand the preference system. If you put your party last and they end up last on the ballot, and there's not a 50% margin, so someone doesn't win with 50% or more of the vote, all those votes get kicked out. So all those centre-right votes are going and all the left ones are staying. You're giving them a natural advantage. And that's what Topher and his marbles and put the majors last all represented. It was just nuts. And don't forget, Monica was also one that went all in on for March for Australia. Well, no, take that back. At first she was against March for Australia, then she was for March for Australia, and then she had to start her own marches. A political weather vane. If One Nation drops in the polls, she'll be off that bandwagon as quick as you can blink. She'll be gone. Harvey, I like Harvey, but if he thinks he's helping One Nation's cause in Victoria by standing in those press conferences and taking on other journalists and not letting the One Nation candidates stand there and push back, people who don't live in Victoria don't understand. There's a lot of socialists now. A lot of people have been convinced about socialism, about Gaza, about all this nonsense. And then there's a lot of people in the middle who are believing a lot of this shit. Harvey is not going to win over the undecided vote. If he's attached to the hip with One Nation in Victoria in the metropolitan seats, you're not going to get there. And I want One Nation to get there. The key to this is good candidates, good policy. People are saying One Nation doesn't have good policy. Go and have a look at their website. Their policy is actually really good. Really good. Got to get good candidates to sell that policy. And they've got to be singing out of the same hymn book. And they've also got to find key candidates, both in Victoria and federally, who are intellectually smart. Like people who can actually go in there and fill the key roles of government. So, for example, Treasurer, Minister for Defence, Foreign Minister, Minister of State that Tony Burke comes in. If they're going to cut immigration, you got to have someone. Malcolm Roberts, I think, would make if he could take on Tony Burke's position, it would be great. Could also take on Chris Bowen's position. Either one of those, I think Malcolm Roberts would be unbelievably good. So you've got to get more people like that in. So hopefully people within One Nation, especially Barnaby Joyce, especially Bernardi, are headhunting people in other parties that got experience that could jump across, because that's what they need to do. I don't want to see this Colin Boyce character in Queensland jumping across. He had his chance and he said no. Now all of a sudden apparently he's turning. This is where One Nation's got to be really careful on who they let in and who they don't let in. That's just my opinion. And they certainly don't need these grifters hanging around them, for God's sakes. Get some people of real integrity. Get some people with some really good candidates. Get some people that understand policy. Get some people who understand how to run ministries and governments and all that. So when they do or can win government, they can hit the ground running and they can have a decent first 3 years. They need to have a decent first 100 days because the media's coming for them. Every bloody arsehole bureaucrat politician who wants to call them racist and bigot will be coming for them. So this is where I think Barnaby Joyce and Cory Bernardi, who've had experience in good governments, well, I won't say good governments, but they've had experience with good people in government, so they know who are the good people and aren't. They need to be talking to them now and start offering them, well, if you come across here, we'll give you this ministry. That's how they get people to come across, and they just target and vet them to death, and then they get them across in. They should be doing that right now. And they should be getting people in the Liberal Party's dead, and that actually gives me some pains, believe it or not, to say it. I voted Liberal for a long time, and I actually think the Liberals, and I know many of you will hate me saying this, I think the Liberals, even under Howard, served this country pretty admirably. After Howard, it all fell apart. Under Turnbull and Morrison, just destroyed it. And I hate to say this, but Peter Dutton didn't help the cause either. And everyone's having to go at Angus Taylor and Matt Canavan. And I get it, but they've inherited a poison chalice. If we're all being fair, the Liberal Party signed the death warrant of the Liberal Party when after Peter Dutton resigned, they chose Susan Ley over Angus Taylor. If Susan Ley really had the best interest of this nation at heart, she wouldn't have created this by-election. Because once she resigned, the Liberals were going to get smashed. So I'm not too sure why all the pundits are out there going, oh, well, this is an absolute boil over. This is seismic. No, it's not. One Nation were always going to win. And I was confident they were always going to win by a fairly decent margin. People are pissed off with the major parties. They're pissed off with the Liberals. The Liberals have lost so much trust. I'm not too sure how they get it back. They should go over to England. If they want a bit of an idea, I'll give them some suggestions. And even then, I'm not too sure they'll do it. One, you got to purge every single moderate you got within your ranks. That's number one. Number two, you've got to stop seeing One Nation as your enemy and start seeing them as their brothers in arms about getting rid of the ALP. Three, you've got to actually seriously sit around a table with them and say, how can we stop throwing barbs against each other like, Patterson did? Patterson's usually a pretty good operator. His little stunt with that volunteer was ridiculous. That was never going to go over well, which is probably a hard part of the reason they polled so poorly. So they've got to sit around a table with Conservatives and say, how do we work together? What does that look like? Is that a coalition? Is it a merger? Who's up front? Who's not? And get a real Conservative party. We now know Conservatives, we've all been saying this for years, if the Liberals got away from their moderates and their Labor light and went full-blown Conservative, they'd win. They didn't listen to the message, and now One Nation's taken that. So they need to get behind One Nation. They're not in front of One Nation. The Liberals, for all intents and purposes, right now are a minor party. Forget their seats in the House. They won those probably, back when Morrison last lost. They've been losing them ever since. So they're down, I think, 25 lower house seats. If they've got half a dozen seats left at the next election, they'll be lucky. Purge your moderates. Don't know whether Angus Taylor's the leader. I think he's really trying, but no one's listening. And his policy on immigration was quite good. He's trying to get policy out there. Susan Ley, if he had have got this and started doing this after Dutton, he might have been a chance. But for them to have Susan Ley and let her go as long as she did, and when Susan Ley came back to Parliament after the Bondi massacre and passed those hate speech laws, bang, the Liberals were gone. I think the Liberals are gone. No one trusts them anymore. They worked with the ALP to get those hate speech laws through, supported it, voted for it. Gone. Ridiculous. So, and everyone's talking about something that happened after that. That wasn't it. It was when they passed those hate speech laws. And that's right. They're blaming the Liberals for bringing down Susan Ley, their only female leader. That wasn't the problem. They should have brought her down ages ago. But now we've finally got two. Finally, we've been waiting for ever since Abbott got knifed, for two Conservative leaders of the Liberals and the Nationals. They've finally got him in Angus Taylor and Matt Canavan, and they've got the poison chalice. The Nationals are in big trouble. They were going on about, they had a rise in their thing. No, you didn't. ALP didn't stand. A lot of those votes that One Nation and Nationals got would have been some pissed off ALP voters who would never vote Liberal. So the Nationals shouldn't be jumping up and down too much about their result. If they are, then they're naive politically. Absolutely naive politically. So it was a great result for One Nation. One we all should be celebrating, but we should be celebrating with an understanding of how far we've got to go if we want to get the ALP out of government. It's great that they've got one seat, but that seat was always going. Sorry, guys, I just want to make sure I've got this on my phone. So got a bit more to go. So the Liberals, going back, purge your moderates. Come up with bold policy that blares out you're a Conservative party, not Labor light, something that's true blue Conservative. And I'll tell you what would help you. I'm telling you now, Liberals, if you're listening, I know you won't do this. I'd even be saying to One Nation, you need a You need a remigration policy. Any bastard in this country that isn't full on for Australian values needs to go. Absolutely. And Angus Taylor started moving that way, didn't go far enough with it. But you need to be having that. You need to be full on. I'm not opposed to migration. I am opposed to migration that's been occurring. And if you listen to Scott Challenge, shout out to Scotty. I don't agree with everything Scott says. Scott wouldn't agree with everything I says. But you know what? Me and Scott can have a conversation. I don't agree with everyone that is around his Australian lobby group. That's fine. We're never going to agree. For example, I don't like that Monica Schmidt, Avi, and Topher have attached themselves to One Nation. But I'm still going to vote for One Nation unless they do something seriously wrong in the next couple of months, years. So we'll see where that goes to. And I'm on board the train. I'm on board the One Nation train. So before people get stuck into me, I just told on one tick. Here we go. I stupidly, people forgot to put my do not disturb on. So I'll just do that now, which I've done. And I get it because these next points are important. So big policy, Liberals, if you're listening, big policy, Conservative policy. I'm talking huge policy, something that will get your attention. And feel free to steal mine. So I've been announcing policy, one person. It's not hard to do policy, on my own Conservative website. And one of them is a 10-year freeze on immigration. I'll probably update that to include remigration. What's got me about remigration are these ISIS brides. If our governments are going to bring these assholes into our country, the next government's got to kick them out. Now, I'm not against migration. I know so many people with either immigrant backgrounds or immigrant heritage. They're fantastic. To me, they're as Aussie as most Aussies. The kids I coach in sport, most of them are from immigrant families and immigrant parents. Wonderful kids, wonderful Aussie kids. So I've got no problem with that. But those ones like the ISIS brides and the ones who want to hold on to their Middle Eastern Sharia law and all that bullshit, piss off. If you're from another nation who's not Islamic, but you want, and there's plenty of those who come here and they say, well, Australia's my second nation, my other nation's my first, piss off. Australia's either first, second, third nation, no other debate. You either accept our values or you don't, or you piss off. If you can't accept them, if you're bludgeon on our welfare, if you've got a criminal history, if you don't have Australian citizenship, you're not intent on getting Australian citizenship, and you want to bring down our country, out you go. Why is that so hard to understand? So that's number one. Number two, and these are both on my thing, I definitely, and I'm going to write some this week because I think it's something that needs to get, and I've been pushing this myself, on the policy debate, is the Conservative side of politics needs to go Republic. And if the Liberal, even if you disagree with it, if you're in the Liberal Party, what do you got to lose? At least if you put that policy forward, guess what it's going to do? There's going to be talk. People are going to be interviewing. They're going to be saying, and you take away the key planks of the future Albo government. Now, if Albo gets in again, and sadly, I think he will. I'll explain why he will in a minute. Albo in the next election will be coming with a Republic. We are far better to have a conservative incentivized republic than a left incentivized republic. If Albo gets in and he wins a referendum on a public, and I tell you now, he will go close, because Australians here don't relate to King Charles. I don't think they really relate to what would be future King William. I think after Queen Elizabeth died, I think the monarchy went with her. Because they just don't stand up for British values. They certainly don't stand up for Australian values. It's about time we stood on our own 2 feet and we brought in a constitution that could repeal all these hate speech laws. Give us a Bill of Rights. Protect our speech. Protect our right to assemble. Protect our rights to move wherever we want. All those rights that we've lost, we need to get them back. And we need to have a clean out of our bureaucracies. We need to start, in my view, again. Why? Because the leftists, one nation can win. And here's your second issue with one nation, let's say, wins government. I don't think they will. But let's say, and I hope they do, let's say they win government or they win it in the head of a coalition, then they're going to be fighting the deep state. The deep state is all our institutions that are infested with leftists. We in Victoria, for nearly a quarter of a decade, we've had ALP government. We have leftists as judges in our education system, in our police system, all over the place. And, usually they're signed on to big contracts and you can't move them on. So there's lots of, especially if you've got a volatile upper house. Same thing federally. We have a lot of left. Don't forget, under Turnbull and Morrison, they appointed a lot of leftist people. They went for the woke DEI. Look at our head of defence. Look at our head of the AFP. They just keep appointing DEI appointments that would be left-leaning. Sorry, I've had a cold this last 2 weeks. So you've got those issues that we've also got to address. So, yes, celebrate last night. Celebrate One Nation. But realise the reality of what's behind that. And third, if I was the Liberals, I would go and have a real long, hard look at the Conservative Party, not to be like them. Have a look at the Conservative Party in England and their leader, Kemi Badenoch. She's amazing. She is one of the most impressive politicians I have seen in a very long time. It's a pity that the Conservatives did such a horrid job for 14 years that no one takes her seriously. She would be a perfect example of what the Liberals need to lead them. She's a woman. She's black. She breaks all the molds. And she is conservative to the core. She is an outstanding speaker. And she is super smart. I might not agree with everything she says, but I agree with an awful lot. And had they had her as their leader 8 years ago, they'd still be in power. Now, she won't win the next election, but she gives the Conservatives a chance at coming back. The Liberals have got to get someone like that. I'm not too sure Angus Taylor's that person. I'm not too sure they've got anybody in their ranks that could do that. Maybe a Jacinta Price, but she's in the upper house. Another outside shot is Michaela Cash, but I'm not too sure about her either. Certainly not Joan Hume. Oh, my God, that woman. There are 3 things that they've got to try and do. I don't know in fact, I'm pretty sure they can't do it. And I'm pretty sure the moderates will tear them down before they do it. And more than likely, if I know the Liberal Party, Angus Taylor will face a leadership spill and he'll be gone and they'll put someone like Andrew Hastie or Tim Wilson in and that'll be the end of them. And so, as a Conservative, what do we need? Well, my basic concern is I don't think One Nation can win by its own. It's got to be a combination of One Nation, the Nationals, and that's going to be hard because they're going to be fighting each other for the regional seats. And if the Liberal parties could get their shit together, they could contest a lot of the metropolitan seats. So you'd need a combination of the 3. So there's your balancing act. Can they get there? I doubt it. The Liberals' pride will get the better of them, and there'll be too many within the Liberal Party that just will not work with One Nation. Why? Because they're One Nation. Not because One Nation's racist or bigoted, they're not. But because their pride won't let them work with One Nation. Then they'll use all those tags, oh, they're racist, they're bigots. And I tell you what else will just torpedo any chance of One Nation winning if they keep having the likes of Avi and Topher and Monica in these inner metropolitan seats. I'll tell you an unpalatable fact. And I'm on board with Bibi Netanyahu and Israel fighting for their own survival over in the Middle East. I'm on board with them in the Iran war. I'm on board with them in Gaza. But that view is unpopular in Melbourne. Telling you now. And if you don't win enough seats in Melbourne, you're not winning government federally. If you don't win enough seats in Sydney, you're not winning government federally. And if they won't like hearing this, if you're too tied to the hip in metropolitan, out in metropolitan seats with Avi Yemeni on your side, you're not winning those seats. You're not winning over the undecided voters. And I was listening to Cos Samaras, who I can't stand. He's blocked me. But he's one part. I'll tell you now, I've worked in these suburbs. He's 100% on an observation he made this week, which was towards the Liberal Party. They are not, and I hate saying this, I'm sure a lot of you will hate hearing it. So many of our electorates now in metropolitan and outer metropolitan seats are tied to the Indian diaspora or something they call it. Basically the Indian community or the Chinese community. In Mount Waverley, in Box Hill, in Springvale, all across, even down near where I live in Glen Ira, around that area, Bentley East, going in towards thing. These are electorates that the Liberals used to win election after election. They don't know about Pauline Hanson. I deal with them every day. I talk politics with them. They're unsure about Pauline Hanson. If Avi Yemeni and Monica and all them get on board their hip, you'll lose them. You'll lose those electorates. They will go to the ALP and we'll have Albo and his mob again. Telling you now as clear as day. And people will knock me for that. They knock me for my criticism of the marbles and the put the majors past. Last thing, I hate to say it, I think I was right. In fact, I'm damn sure I was right. I'm telling you now, if some of these grifters latch themselves to One Nation will win the regions. They won't win the metropolitan seats. And I'm not sure. I think David Farley, I think he was a good candidate. I'm not too sure. I don't know enough about him, so I'm not judging him. I'm just saying I hope he's not one of those types or jump ship. I don't know whether he's that. He seems a decent guy, but the things in his background, like I said, they haven't refuted. So I'm hoping and praying he sticks fat with One Nation. But he was a good candidate in that he spoke well, he presented well, he was a people person. You could see people coming up to him and his all that. The guy, and God bless him for standing, because it must be one of the hardest things to do. But the guy stood in Nepean, state-wise, he wasn't a good candidate. Could be the best guy on the planet, but he couldn't speak well publicly. When people come up to him, he wasn't a people person. You could just see that. I don't know. Apparently they were inundated with people who want to be candidates down Nepean, and this was their best guy. So I'm not too sure. And I'm looking to have, I can't pronounce your surname, Bianca, who I think she's president of One Nation in Victoria. Lovely girl. And she's said she's going to come on my podcast. I'd love to get her on and talk to you about this. Because, again, I want One Nation to be successful in the Victorian election. I think that's going to be a hard battle. I'm not too sure One Nation will do as well in Victoria state-wise like they did in South Australia. They definitely need to find someone with a big enough profile to lead the party in Victoria if they're going to have any chance of winning some seats. I just don't. A perfect fit would be a younger Sam Newman. Conservative to his britches, will say what he thinks. He gets a lot of attention, but he's too old. He's in his 80s. So they need to find someone, a younger version of Sam Newman. I'll tell you who would be really good, and I'll shout out to him. I reckon if they approached him, Tony Shaw. And him, me, as a Richmond supporter, saying Tony Shaw. If you follow Tony Shaw, I have. He's very conservative, very conservative. The Magpie Army would give him a look. He's very well known in Victorian circles. I'll bring this up with Bianca. If I was in One Nation, I would be approaching someone like Tony Shaw. And anybody, you got to grab attention. Nothing grabs attention more in Victoria and Melbourne than an AFL personality. So someone with conservative values who's an AFL personality, Tony Shaw fits those bills, and they would grab attention. And I think Tony Shaw speaks well publicly too. And he's certainly a person of the people. You have to be, being a footballer. So he's not the first footballer that would have gone into politics. And if you follow what he says on X, very, very similar views to One Nation and Pauline Hanson. So I reckon that would be someone I'd be approaching as One Nation to potentially become their leader in this state and give it a real shake-up. I'd be looking to approach a couple, actually, with a real high profile that can draw eyes to it. I mean, the key to politics is getting eyes on onto your platform, your policies and whatever. And people right now are looking. Here's one last thing in my observations. There's a thing called hubris in politics. And I hope this is the reality that One Nation understand. If people took a good look at the policy platform of One Nation, it's a good policy platform. They have people who I hold David Limbrick and Jordan Ditloff in the Libertarian Party in high regard. I've got to know especially Jordan. He's an amazing human being. He's achieved much. I've had lots of discussions with him, and we've talked often. He's been on my podcast. He's a person of high integrity. I don't care if he's a libertarian. If he was in our parliament would be much better. David Limbrick is another one I hold in high regard. I'm glad he's in a parliament. I'm worried that he'll be staying in there after this next election. If we lose him, that's a big loss. Just the same with Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Roberts. I hold those two in high regard. They've stuck fat. They've pushed their party. They stand for what they believe in for this nation. You don't have to agree with them, but I hold them in high regard. So you've got to get those types of people into that leadership group with a high profile. That's who you need leading what we've got here in Victoria, both in the Victorian election and federally. And you got to get eyes on it. And then if you can see the integrity behind it, the policy behind it, you're halfway home. But I don't think they've quite got that here in Victoria, which is understandable. I mean, One Nation has been non-existent in Victoria until that Nepean by-election. So the problem I see in both Farrer and in Nepean is I'm not sure it's not yet more than a protest vote. And I hope it is. I really hope that political pendulum swung. But I'm not convinced of it. People are just so pissed off with the major parties, they will find someone to vote for. And if One Nation doesn't work out, they'll keep looking. I hope One Nation works out. I hope the Libertarians, I actually wish the Libertarians were where One Nation was right now as well. So we had those two parties with that integrity I'm talking about. Because if it doesn't work out and they look past people with that integrity, what comes next might not be so great. So, and if you don't understand what I'm talking about, study history. All right? Because then we will look. People say One Nation's far right. They're not. But if One Nation doesn't work out, people may start looking far right. And if we do start looking far right, to the real far right, then we are in just as much trouble then as we are with the far left. So that would be my final opinion on the night. So to Pauline, to Malcolm Roberts, who I interviewed, to Barnaby Joyce, to everybody at One Nation at your head office, who I've dealt with now a couple of times, wonderful people. Congratulations on something you've fought long and hard for. Be careful who you got around for you. Watch out for the grifters. Watch out for those jumping on the bandwagon. Make sure you do your vetting. And I think there could be some amazing days ahead for you. And you thoroughly deserve it. And this country deserves it. I have some just not major concerns, just some nervous concerns. So just make sure you keep doing what you're doing and you've got the right people there with you. You made some good choices, I think, with Corey Bernardi and Barnaby. Sorry, Barnaby. But I would definitely start talking to – I would approach Tony Shaw in Victoria. I think he might surprise you. So that's my tip coming from all people, a Richmond supporter. Talking to bloody Richmond, should have won 2 in a row and we blew it today. So anyway, JJ, he's got such a – that's my opinion on yesterday's election. I'll still be pumping up the One Nation ties. So from me, from this boy here, God bless your kids. God bless your grandkids. God bless your pets. God bless that flag. God bless this country. God bless One Nation and Pauline. because the bastards, they're going to come for her even harder now. So all of us there who want One Nation to be successful, all of us who hold Pauline in high regard, make sure we're still there standing with her. All right? And let's just change this country for the better. All right. That's it. I've had my rant. Good night, everyone. Stay safe. See you next time.